ونصلي على رسوله الكريم أما بعد. So the goal for today is to get into the next section, starting with Ayah 87. This next section, I think, extends to from Ayah 87 through 96. And considering our size, chances are we might even move further than that, inshallah. So, just to, again, recap just a little bit to keep everybody on the same page. This whole section that began from Ayah 75 and ends with Ayah 123 is exploring the wrong behaviors that people do in relationship with revelation. Last time we saw it in relationship with their commitments, and today we're going to see some core behaviors. What are we essentially saying? That this whole course is addressing the question of how do people misbehave in relationship with religion, and deeper than that, why do people behave the way they behave? Okay. So now we're going to be getting into more of the psychology, but we're going to be going back and forth between these are bad behaviors that people do in relationship with why do people behave this way. So the first group of ayahs that we looked at was ayah 75 unto, I think, ayah 82. There we saw different things that people do in relationship with revelation. 5 wrong things that people are doing in relationship with revelation. And one key point to understand is that if you're doing something wrong in relationship with revelation, then by extension you're doing something wrong in relationship with religion. So if I am changing revelation, if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has delivered revelation to us through the Prophet, peace be upon him, and we're changing the revelation, then by extension we're changing the whole religion. And the point we made last time is that if I'm changing revelation, that's not something that's very common in our community because so many people have the Quran memorized. So you can't change revelation very much, but you can start changing things in religion. Another different thing that people did is that they would withhold knowledge, that rather than share all withhold knowledge that can be used against them. This is more a criticism of scholars, but the same point, that if we are going to practice our religion, we have to practice everything, which includes the hopeful aspects of our religion as well as the fearful aspects of our religion. Okay. And does anyone remember any of the other misbehaviors related to revelation? There were 3 other ones. One was changing the ayahs, one is withholding. Anything else? Do you remember? You can look at your notes, that's perfectly fine. It's been a while since we've been together, so we need to review a little bit. Yeah, exactly. So another is to speak out of conjecture, to speak out of wishful thinking. Okay. That this is how I want to present my religion to everyone else. And what is the concern in our culture? That often you have some people who want to present everything as unhappy, as terror, as frightening. And then you have other people who want to present everything as soft and warm. And our tradition is a whole package. So there is hopeful aspects of our tradition as well as fearful aspects of our tradition. So the wishful thinking for some people is that all they want to do is speak about hell. And the wishful thinking of other people is all they want to do is speak about heaven and forgiveness. And ours is a tradition that has the whole thing, right? You have to speak of the whole tradition. And then what else are wrong behaviors? Now we have 3. So the next big thing is to make up something and then to say that this is coming from Allah. Again, with the Quran, you can't do that. At least in Chicago, you can't make up something and say, okay, this is in the Quran. Because anybody who can easily check it, and you probably have 5 hafizes in the room who can verify, right? But you can do that in religion in general, right? You can say, our deen says such and such and such, and then attribute it to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. There, you as a believer have perfect right to challenge someone. Give me your proof, right? Meaning, we have a very important tradition of scholars in our community, but that does not mean, as we've discussed before, that you can give up your mind. You have no right to give up your own intellect, because on the Day of Judgment, you are standing alone. Right? So, when someone is making something up and attributing it to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that is essentially something very serious, more applicable to scholars. But if someone says something strange to you about the deen, go ahead, ask for proof. If I say anything strange, go ahead, ask me for proof, and then I'll try to avoid the subject. No, I'm just kidding. And then what's the fifth thing? I'm sorry? Yeah, so even making further theological claims without any evidence. So here the example we have is people who said that they're going to only be in the fire for a few days. Right? So ask for proof. How do you know you're only going to be in the fire for just a few days? But today, inshallah, we're going to see some reasons why do people make such claims. So the 5 misbehaviors we saw in relationship with revelation and then by extension with religion. 1 is to change the revelation. 2 is to withhold knowledge. 3 is to speak wishfully. 4 is to make something up and attribute it to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And 5 is to make a whole theological claim without any foundation. And then in our discussion of the next section, which was essentially ayah 83 to 86, our focus was on misbehavior related to commitments. And here the example was the commitment, the pact, the mithaq that Bani Israel, the children of Israel, made with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And before getting into the misbehavior, this was sort of abstract, one thing that we focused on was the nature of the commitments that they were making to Allah. And this was in ayah 83. Okay. What was the pact that Bani Israel made with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Number 1, you will worship no one except for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then being good to parents, being good to your relatives, being good to orphans, being good to needy, and speaking kindly to everyone. And then after that, salah and zakah. And the important point that we were observing here is that before looking at your obligations to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, what is central here, it's looking at your obligations in terms of how you behave with other people. That your character and good manners are centrally important in terms of how you conduct yourself as a believer, which is something that a lot of our conversations is lost. We're so focused on fulfilling the 5 pillars, we forget that central is that you have to conduct yourself as an upright person. And think about this. When you think of a Muslim business, okay, do you honestly think of them as being super upright compared to every other business? Hopefully the answer is yes. Sometimes, as you and I know, sometimes the answer is not yes. Right? Or when you think of unfortunately, even Muslim scholars, do you think of Muslim scholars as people who are upright in character, who are rock solid in character? Hopefully the answer is yes, but sometimes the answer is not yes. I mean, to make the point a step further, when I was in Egypt a couple of years ago, and we were coming home, I was so happy to land in Greece. Okay, now Greece is not known for being upright in terms of business, especially these days. But I was thinking, why am I so happy to be in a Western country? And part of the reason was the sense of just, I can trust their business ethics. At the local level, if I'm buying something, that hopefully I can trust that I'm getting what I paid for. Right? So this is something that we have an innate need, but this is central to our deen, to have an upright character. So sometimes we have this split in our community that on the one hand we speak of people who are upright in terms of their religious practices, and then we have the people who are upright in terms of their character, but they're not strong in their religious practices. Our tradition is that you have to have both. Right? Okay. Now, from there we had this discussion, especially focused in Ayah 85, of picking and choosing what we follow. Again, what's the overall theme? We have to embrace the entire text. That our goal as Muslims is to practice, to embody the entire text, not just these portions and skip those portions. Because the result is that if you're picking and choosing, you're going to have consequences. And the discussion that we led to is that the Islam that we are giving our children, the Islam that we are giving the younger generation, is often focused exclusively on making them feel good about themselves. Or the opposite, making them feel like they live in some other planet that doesn't really apply here. And the result very often is that the Islam that we are giving our children is actually a doorway to send them out of Islam. And I'm saying this because so many undergrads come and talk to me seeking advice with their spiritual problems. And a lot of those spiritual problems result from how they've been taught, often by non-experts. And so, what is the end result? If you're picking and choosing from your belief in this ayah, what can be the result? Except for disgrace in this world. Here the word is ignominy in this world, as well as punishment in the afterlife. So what is the subtle point here? That the whole deen, in terms of practicing our deen, by definition, is good for us. When something is made haram, what does that mean also? It means that it's not good for us. Okay. Sometimes I can give logical explanations for why I should not do this. Sometimes I can't. But the core legal theory here is that if something is forbidden, it is also by definition not good for us. It's not arbitrary. You don't do these things and you do those things. And keep this point in mind, because in a lot of traditions you have rules, but they're basically dogma. That, okay, you do this, you don't do this, you believe this, you don't believe this. Why? Because that's just what the tradition is. We're taking a point a step further, that in terms of our legal theory, something that is prohibited is considered to be harmful for you. And something that is disliked, makruh, is something that you can technically do, but it's probably not good for you. Okay? This is part of the legal theory of our tradition. So the end result being that if you follow something that is not good for you, if you do something that's not good for you, then by definition you're going to be experiencing suffering at some point. Not in the sense of a tornado hitting you, but just the natural consequences of bad behavior. What does that also mean? It also means that intuitively you already know what's good and bad. Okay? When we call our tradition Deen al-Fitra, we're saying that already, just by being a human, you understand much of our deen. Okay? Because what is our deen focused on? It's bringing you back to your fitra, bringing you back to your natural state. Okay? So, now, that leads us then into today's discussion. Today's discussion is adding more to our conversation. Okay. So let's look at starting from ayah 87. وَلَقَدْ آتَيْنَا مُوسَى الْكِتَابَ. So indeed we gave, we being Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we gave Musa the kitab. How did we translate kitab? Anybody remember? This is going back quite a long time ago in some of our classes. So, sorry? Prescription, excellent, mashallah. So kitab, simply we translate as book. More accurately would be prescription. And what do we mean by prescription? Something that is prescribed for you in terms of action. I don't like using the word law. Law gets too scary. Because prescription, what is the idea? Physicians, when you're giving a patient a prescription, you're giving them something that's good for them. Right? Cool. Yeah, you like that, right? Yeah, good. Okay, I got to talk to physicians in their language. Okay. And we followed him with, this translation says, a train or a succession of other messengers. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, especially in the context of Bani Israel, He gives them Musa alayhi salam, their guide. Right? And then after Musa alayhi salam, they have prophet after prophet after prophet after prophet. Sometimes they even have multiple prophets. Who else was a prophet at the time of Musa alayhi salam? Harun, right? Who else was a prophet at the time of Isa alayhi salam? Yahya, John the Baptist, not John the Evangelist. So this is a community that in particular has received prophet after prophet after prophet, or messenger after messenger. Okay. And in addition, what else did Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give them? He gave them Isa. Small side point, I think one half of the room is going to like this point. When we speak of Isa alayhi salam, what is the common title we give him that we have here in the Arabic? So that's one. What's another one? Son of Mary. Isa ibn Maryam. And we might have talked about this before. What is ibn Maryam? Son of Mary. If it was bin Maryam, it would be simply son of Mary. This is, if you look in the Arabic up there, unfortunately I can't highlight specific words. It's Isa ibn Maryam. What's the difference between saying Isa bin Maryam versus Isa ibn Maryam? So, well, that's what bin Maryam is also, her beta, one of the honors or one of the titles of Isa is Ibn Maryam. So, one of his honors is that he's the son of Mary. Okay. Meaning, if it was just bin, the normal way to express it would be Isa bin Maryam. Okay. But here you see the alif or the hamza wasla there. Here the point is that this is actually one of his titles. What are you saying, Mom? Okay. Oh, somebody's alarm. Okay. I don't know if you want to check which car it is. Okay. So this is I want to use a different word other than something to be proud of, but I mean it's one of his honors. Praiseworthy is good. Yeah. that we often speak of praising Maryam because she is the mother of Isa. Okay? But it's actually, in some ways, it's the other way around. That part of the praise of Isa is that he's the son of Mary. Well, let me repeat that point because we just had a little bit of hecticness. That often we praise Maryam, alayha salam, because she is the mother of Jesus, peace be upon him. That's not our tradition. It's actually the other way around. That part of the praise of Jesus is that he is the son of Mary, peace be upon them. So, what do you think? You like that point?
I like it. I'm just wondering why it's not common for everyone.
Why isn't that common?
My son is not my son.
So in the case of for example, Rashid, we would say one of his honors is that he's the son of Tasnima. Sure, yeah. In the case of Omer, one of his honors is that he's the son of Tasnim. Yeah, definitely.
Is your father's last name? Is that American tradition?
Is it American tradition that you take your father's last name?
Let's say call them by their father's name, right?
Yes, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says call them by their father's name, and let's hope it's... I'm sorry?
I don't know, maybe that is the interpretation, that Qiyamah people will be called by their mother's last name.
They'll be called... one understanding is that in Qiyamah you will be called by the name that your mother called you.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, and so...
I think that's wise, yeah.
You think it's wise? Yeah. I'm sorry? Perhaps, yeah. So maybe, yeah. Maybe. I mean, day of judgment, it's scary for me to suggest that, but yeah, maybe the name that your mother called you. So this is just a small subpoint. Good. No. Yes, please.
In this ayah, our Prophet addressed himself as we. Why is it we?
Okay, very nice question. Okay, so here Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is speaking about himself as we. Even if we go all the way back to the beginning of Surah Al-Baqarah, says, what is the ayah? So they spend, they do infaq of what we have bestowed upon them. What is the we here? Anyone? Why, if Allah? Yeah, exactly.
Narrowed down to one.
Yeah, this is essentially we would call an Arabic technique of language, that if I am referring to myself informally, I can use I. If I'm referring to myself formally, I use we. There's a similar thing also in Urdu. We have sort of the reverse in some of the European languages. So in Spanish, if I was referring to you informally, I would say tú. But formally, I would say usted, or in German, I would use du to refer to you informally, but I would use sie formally. So,
Prof, if this is just my understanding,
yeah.
I never referred to any book. I thought that Allah addressed we because the Malaika also help the scripture. Right or wrong?
So the question is that Allah is using we to include the Malaika. There's an understanding that when something is being given, that sometimes it seems that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala especially uses we in that case. So for example, it says, we gave them. So it may, that argument can work here. But the primary understanding is that this is a technique of Arabic. Yeah.
So when I explain to anyone that, because I'm actually now teaching Quranic translation to somebody else.
Oh, very nice.
So the we should be like, it means that it is Arabic technique of saying it in a formal way.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. There is, for example, very quickly, if we go to, I think this is in Surah Al-Kahf, Surah 80, or Surah 18, around Ayah 81. Yeah. Okay, so this is a conversation between Musa, alayhi salam, Moses, peace be upon him, and he's not named here, but Khidr. So this is a story where Moses is told to go learn from Khidr, and then the conversation at the beginning is Khidr tells him, you're not going to have the patience, and so Khidr does something that Moses doesn't understand, and he tells him, I told you you're not going to understand, and Moses says, no, let me continue. And then Khidr then explains, I did this for this reason, I did this for this reason. And then in Ayah 81, he speaks about this thing he does with this boy. And in Ayah 81, he says, فَأَرَدْنَا. He is a man speaking about himself, and he's using we. Right? So this is a case where a man is using we to speak about himself. So the point being, again, that this is it's I don't know if it's common. Do you guys use it today? It is common in colloquial too. Okay, very, very interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, even in other Semitic languages, for example, even in the Bible, I believe it appears
well, this is the argument that's given from in the biblical perspective. The argument that Christians use is that, okay, we here is referring to Trinity, right? Yeah. I mean, from our perspective, it would be the formal language. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So, again, what is going on here? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is speaking about these prophets that He sent, and He sends Jesus, son of Mary, with clear proofs, bayyinat. Okay. What's the difference between ayah and bayyina? Because these are two very important words in terms of what we call the Quranic philosophy. What do we mean by ayah or ayat? Signs, symbols, and part of the point here is that everything is a sign of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? Everything is a sign of the creator of those things. Now what's bayyina or bayyinat? Sorry?
evidence.
It's like evidence, it's proof. And the language that is commonly used in the Quran is ayah. Now think about this, that one of the challenges we have is in trying to convince people to believe is, what is your proof? What is your proof for the truth of Islam? How would you answer that question? What is your proof for the truth of Islam? So Quran, go. The whole thing, it's the Quran plus something else. In the case of our era, Surah Al-Bayyinah, the evidence. Good. So, لم يكن الذين كفروا من أهل الكتاب والمشركين منفكين حتى تأتيهم البينة. So those who reject among the people of the book as well as the mushriks will not stop until you give them bayyina, until you give them clear proof. So what is the clear proof? Rasul min Allah, a messenger from Allah, yatlu suhufan mutahhara, reciting purified pages, fiha kutubun qayyima. How would you translate kutubun qayyima? Established legal practices, something along those lines. Yeah. What are we saying here? That the whole proof of the deen is the Quran and the Prophet, peace be upon him. Okay. Keep this point in mind. You can't separate the Quran from the Prophet. On paper you can. Here's the Quran. Here's the Hadith. But in terms of practice, you can't separate the Quran from the Prophet. That the whole proof is not only the text, but it's the living example of the person who lived the text. I mean, this is the question that I often pose to my students. What evidence do you have for what you believe in? What evidence do we have that Jesus, peace be upon him, ever even existed? 2/3 of the world believes that there was a man, 2,000 years ago, who was born from a virgin birth. All the Muslims, all the Christians. Yeah. What evidence do we have that he existed? We don't have a grave, right? At least in the case of Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, we have a grave. We have graves for everybody. Okay? For Jesus, we don't have a grave. We have some places that are marked that this is where this happened, this is where this happened. You see churches are set up there. Okay? What evidence do we have that he existed?
Quran.
That's basically it. It's the Quran. Okay? That is our evidence for the existence of Jesus. What is our evidence for the existence of Moses or Ibrahim, peace be upon them? We do have some places that are identified as graves. I had a student who was a rabbi, and I was telling him how cool it was that when I was driving through that region, here's a place where you have Lut. I mean, it's not a cool story, but I mean, if you look at that region, it looks like, the earth was turned upside down. The stone just looks different there. And you're going on the highway, this is the land of Dawood, peace be upon him. And then here's the land of such and such. And he argued that, okay, none of that is real. Right. He says that someone came along, and I forgot who he mentioned, it might have been St. Catherine, who basically said, this is where this is, this is where this is, this is where this is, and we've decided that those are the historic sites. So what is our evidence for those? Again, it's the Quran. That's why we believe in those things. So whether or not this spot in Hebron is the site of the grave of Ibrahim alayhi salam, and who else is buried there? Ishaq, right? It's the real issues, we believe in them because the Quran says so. But what am I saying here? That our proof is the Quran and the Prophet. Now, often we only present the Quran, but you want to present the Quran and the Prophet. That here, we even have a whole history where we can identify this happened here, that happened there, here's the graves of everybody, that this is a real thing. And then we also have the whole history of the hadith sciences, which is a different topic. But what is the key point that I'm making here? That the difference between bayinat and ayat is bayina is proof. Ayah is saying, okay, this is a sign of all these things. Okay. So, for example, when we speak of the splitting, or when we speak of, not splitting of the embryo, the formation of the embryo in the Quran, is that ayah or bayina? Is that a proof?
Now it's turned into
It's often used as a bayina. Okay. But did the companions of the Prophet, peace be upon him, did they understand those ayahs to mean that this is the formation of the embryo? Has anyone checked? I shouldn't even give you the answer to that question, right? But what is the actual issue? That what we find in this ayah seems to match perfectly with science as we understand it right now. There are other arguments that I think are better. The point about the split between salt water and fresh water, I think, is a much stronger argument, because there it's more literal, right? And we're speaking about people who are sitting in the middle of the desert, right? How do they know this stuff, right? I think those points are much more interesting. Right?
Yeah, they are so different. You can see them right there.
Mm-hmm.
In South Africa, you can see them. Cape Town, I just saw it in Kanyakumari. Completely different.
Really, you can actually see the difference. Interesting.
You can see it. Yeah.
The difference between the two waters, very interesting. You're making a point.
Yeah, even at one place Allah says everything He has created is theirs.
Okay.
And maybe 1,400 years ago, it may have been interpreted as, you know what, it's talking about living things, we haven't seen them. But only in 20th century, science discovered everything down to subatomic particles, extremely short-lived particles. They're all in pairs.
Everything is in pairs? Okay. Okay. If you're very interested.
Everything.
Okay.
That's why let's talk about living things only.
Very nice point. Okay, so not everything, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying everything is in pairs, it's not limited to living things. Okay. So keep this, what is the question that I'm raising is how do we look at what we believe in? Okay? What is the proof for what you believe in? And I mean, we're going to touch base on this, touch this point a little bit further, maybe today, but let's see. But here's where the question comes deeper. Okay. Suppose I give you a number of proofs for the truth of my tradition, okay? And someone doesn't believe. Okay? This is what we saw with the story of the Prophet, peace be upon him. His family members who know him for his honesty, and they probably, in one way, understood the Quran better than we might ever understand it, because it's in their language, immediately in their language. But they didn't believe. Why didn't they believe? Why didn't Abu Jahl believe in the Prophet, peace be upon him? So from one perspective, Allah gave guidance to these people, but didn't give guidance to those people. That's correct too. But in terms of his motivation, what was his reason for not believing? Sorry? So deeper than that, we're saying arrogance. What was his excuse? Well, his excuse was basically that the Prophet, peace be upon him, wanted to make his own family the leaders of the Quraysh. That was the excuse he was giving. Okay? Even though Abu Jahl at night used to listen to the Prophet, peace be upon him, reciting the Quran. Right? Abu Sufyan at night used to get caught listening to the Prophet, peace be upon him, reciting the Quran. Okay? Alhamdulillah, Abu Sufyan later became Muslim. And there's even the case where there's a competition of poetry, and they enter Surat Al-Kawthar, and they put this on, they hang this in the Quran, and they say that this could not be written by a man. And still they didn't believe. Okay? So this gets answered now at the bottom part of this ayah. أَفَكُلَّمَا جَاءَكُمْ رَسُولٌ. So is it that whenever a messenger comes to you, bima la tahwa. Okay. Something, how would you translate la tahwa? Sorry? Yeah, something you don't want, something you don't love. That's an interesting translation. Anfusakum, something that in your nafs you don't want. When a messenger comes to you with something you don't want, there's 3 levels of response that people give. First one, astakbartum. You become arrogant. So this is this point. That sometimes if you are faced with something that you know is correct, that you know is good for you, but you reject it because you don't want to face it, what do people do? They hide behind arrogance. And if that is not enough, فَفَرِيقًا كَذَّبْتُمْ. And then some of them you start accusing of lying. Okay, this is a fraud. And if that is not enough, وَفَرِيقًا تَقْتُلُونَ. Then you kill some. This little simple point is summing up the whole life of the Prophet, peace be upon him, especially in Makkah. How did his family, how did the leaders of Makkah respond when he came with this message? First, they laughed at him. Right? He invites them over for dinner. Who's the one who's going to embrace this message? No one has had a more noble message than I have. And then Ali, may Allah be pleased with him, he embraces the message, but Ali is a young man, so they all start laughing. Right? And then they think he's essentially going through a phase. But when that is not enough, he continues preaching, peace be upon him. And so what do? They start accusing him of lying. He's a sorcerer, he's a poet, he's possessed, he's splitting up families. Okay. And then when that was not enough, then they decided, all right, they have to kill him. Okay. But what is the key point that I'm making here? That when you're faced with something that you know is correct, but you don't want to face it, this is very much human nature. This is how we behave very often. Okay. Yes, sir?
Is there any significance to the order that those are related in?
So I'm putting those in that order. That the first response is often astakbartum, meaning you hide, you seek from arrogance. Okay. And then when that's not enough, you resort to accusing the messenger.
And there are levels that are getting worse?
Yes, levels that are getting worse.
The reason I ask is obviously that term, astakbar, is used for shaitan.
Yeah.
But the second and third terms are.
Mm-hmm. That in the case of the devil, why would the devil not want to kill the messenger? Or kill the believers? Because then they go to heaven. Right? That the devil wants you to make your choices of misguidance. So if he resorts to killing you, then he's sending you to heaven. What do you think?
I thought he did have that power.
Does he have that power? Maybe not directly. I don't know, but I think he definitely has that power to cause other people to do it, though, which some people do kill. But maybe that he doesn't have that power anyway, to cause your death. I don't know why he would. Sorry?
Yeah, the devil only has power to whisper in Islam versus Christianity, where they definitely believe that he has power to inflict harm on humanity because they view him as the enemy of God.
Mm-hmm. Well, the devil, essentially, the extent of his power is to whisper and to dazzle you and to make you forget, right? I don't know if that means by extension that he doesn't have the power to do all these other things. But in any case, still the point being that that you're correct that it only describes him as the first point. But yeah, actually, let me think about this some more then, inshallah. Yeah. But I still think that there's still some point to the argument for why would the devil not want to kill you? Because that'll send you to heaven. And his goal is not to get rid of you, his goal is to send you to hell. There's got to be a revolt. Okay. So let's answer this from the inverse. Okay. What we've basically all spoken about is how to live. Okay. If we look at this from the perspective of the Day of Judgment, okay, one point is on the Day of Judgment I'm going to be standing alone. Okay, for my choices. Now, when I'm looking at it from that perspective, okay, it seems to me it would be in my best interest to absolutely consult scholars, right? To make sure that what I'm doing is appropriate. Now, if the scholar gives me something that I don't buy, just like we saw in those previous ayahs, I have perfectly reasonable justification. Okay, give me your evidence. So what else am I saying? One point is that on the Day of Judgment, you're held to account alone, so you have to make your decisions. But the second point is that you do, I would highly recommend that you do find scholars that you trust, because they are still experts. At a very shallow level, absolutely, you can develop an understanding of the Quran. You can develop a relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is if you think all the way back to our first class of Volume 1, when I raised the question, can you have a relationship with Allah without the Quran? And I argued yes. Can you have a relationship with Allah without Islam? Yes. Can you have a relationship with Allah without Islam? Yes. What is the point of the Quran? Is to make sure you have a healthy relationship with Allah. So I'm saying you can definitely do that. Okay? And you can probably raise your family that way. Okay? But as soon as you try to do anything beyond that, I think then you really need to engage with the scholars in just the most basic sense. But even deeper than that, I think there is a world of difference between a scholar and a layperson. Right? Just I'm saying practically speaking. I agree that there are many scholars who do not live in the same world that we do. Right? They live in a world that existed 800 years ago, 1400 years ago, or never existed. But you're already going to be making that decision in your conversations with the scholars. Who do I listen to? Who do I not listen to? That you're going to do. Right? And you might turn to this scholar for these matters. You might turn to those scholars for those matters. And you might not turn to any scholar for these other matters. Well, this is not so much picking and choosing. This is me looking for the best answer for everything. Right? Well, I mean, at the end of the day, you're making your choice, right? You know, I mean, because ours is not a tradition of clergy. But the point I'm making is that we also should not underestimate what the scholars have to offer. We have too many examples understood of scholars who do not live in our world, right? They're a product of the curriculum that they're created in. Right? No doubt. Right? Part of the reason I went into Islamic studies is because nobody could answer my questions, right? You know, I've had those cases where the scholar would say, don't question, right? You know, or the scholar would say, okay, you can't have any pictures, and you go to his house and he has this wrestling videotape, and I thought, okay, well, this doesn't make any sense, you know? So I know all the experiences that you're all talking about. But I'm saying, having gone through a lot of this study, or a little bit, I shouldn't say a lot, a little bit of this study, that there is a big difference between the scholar and the layperson, speaking in terms of my own sense. Look at it from another perspective. Why are you here in this class? Right. You know, you're saying that, all right, okay, this little punk, okay, for whatever he's saying seems to make sense. I buy it. I accept it. Right. I don't know Arabic. Okay, so I'm just making up. No, anyway. So the point is that I think inherently we do actually do that. We do go to those people that we trust. Just the problem is that there's a lot of people that we don't trust, that haven't won our confidence. Yes?
I'm trying not to say this, but
say it.
We really go to people that fit the biases we already have.
Of course. Yeah, we go to the people that fit our biases. Yeah.
Because it makes sense to do what you already think.
Sure. I would say that's a very, very important point, that a lot of times the people we go to, already they're fitting a mold that we are requiring them to fit. No doubt. I agree with that, right? And ideally, you would go to people who don't fit that mold also. But practically speaking, we usually don't. I think that's a very, very important point.
By the same token, if you go to somebody who's a scholar that you like their mold, and let's say you go ask them for some thick ruling and they're qualified to do that, you're stuck with that.
Okay.
At that point, when you get that thick ruling and you don't follow that ruling, then you're held accountable for, well, you ask somebody who's got more knowledge, why are you going to backtrack and say, I'm going to follow that ruling?
So, yeah, I mean...
Definitely a heavy responsibility for somebody and asking somebody.
So you're saying that if I'm following the scholar and then I ask for an opinion and the scholar gives me a scholarly opinion and I don't follow it, then there's something wrong, right? Okay. Let me raise this whole question a different way. Okay. All of us, well, most of us have faced the death of our loved ones. Okay. Do you invoke scholars then to make sure the burial and everything is done properly? Do you? You do? What do you think? I think we do. Right? That I think there's a part of us that does, out of concern to make sure we're doing things properly. Okay? That I think even if we don't follow scholars for just about anything in our day, in our year, there are times where we do. We do turn to scholars just to make sure everything is being done properly. Yeah. So I think that is also within our culture. So what am I saying in conclusion? That, okay, the scholars are not thinking for you, but they do have expertise, and you have to find the ones that you trust. Yeah. Right. Yeah.
I hate to bring up the doctor analogy again, but it's a perfect analogy.
Okay. Okay.
But they're going to give you
Well-
advice, and it's up to you whether you take it or not.
Well, yeah, actually, I think that part you probably agree with then, right? That like this physician gives me my prescription, and I decide, all right, now I'm going to go to another physician. Yeah.
Yes, well, they go to a mall, you know, you go in one shot, that's how doctors are too.
Okay.
They're human beings. People come
What? Doctors are human beings? You mean they're prone to error?
I'm telling you, that's exactly what I tell my patients also, that, you know, going to a mall, you go to one shop, you don't like something, you go to another.
Okay.
It's not binding. Why
Okay.
are whatever the scholars say is binding on us? I don't understand that.
Okay.
I treat them as a doctor.
Okay.
You know, if I don't like it, I should have that choice.
Okay.
I should go and ask somebody else for
Uh-huh.
a better opinion. And the guidance is right here.
Okay.
So it's not arrogance. It's just you know,
Well,
that's the
but this is the core question that I'm raising. If I'm not following someone, what is my real reason? And that's basically what it comes down to. Okay, I know there's more points, but let's take a break here, inshallah, and then we'll continue with more excitement. Sorry?
8:20, so if we take a break, then are we just going to end class?
No, we still have so much more. Yeah. Well, I mean, we can in class. Okay, tell you what. Starting from 88 and 89, this is sort of a good breaking point, even though we basically made it through one ayah. On the syllabus, you'll notice I expected that this would take 2 weeks anyway. What do you think? Are you satisfied with what we have discussed today, or do you want more? You want more after break? Okay, then let's take a break. Okay, well, akhir da'wana and alhamdulillah rabbil alameen. Were you hoping to go to a movie or something? No, I'm kidding.